Good evening. Just one day after the huge and peaceful anti-government demonstrations in Cairo, an ugly turn. Fighting between pro-government demonstrators and opponents of the Mubarak regime. There are reports of government supporters riding horses and camels into the crowd, only to be pulled down by protesters, and rocks, metal pipes, and Molotov cocktails thrown. Opponents of the president claim they are being attacked by thugs hired by the police. The army appears to have stayed neutral, at one point trying to separate the two groups. No tally of injuries yet, and just yesterday it seemed like the Egyptian president could not resist calls to resign. That maybe even this sweet video from an 8-year-old Saudi girl named Juju might push him over the edge.
Juju, what would you say to President of Egypt now if you're talking to him? What advice would you give him?
Okay, I would tell him to remove that law about letting him be the president forever, and let them vote. Let the people of Egypt vote. Because if you don't, they're just gonna make problems for you, and it's gonna be harder for you to rule your country, and they're gonna be on TV forever.
Okay.
And then they're gonna just make huge problems, and then you're gonna waste all your money to fix all the hotels that they damage. And by the way, some of your police officers moved their jacket and they're joining the people.
That says it all. That's all you need to say. That video posted by One Holy Sinner, already viewed by more than 100,000 folks. Now it appears that the demonstrators and calls from President Obama for a speedy transition to a new government might not be enough to topple Mr. Mubarak. We will have more on this in a minute. What else is on our agenda tonight? Well, we will turn to local matters, continuing our State of the Boroughs series with Bronx Borough President Ruben Diaz Jr. We'll ask how the Bronx might fare under Governor Cuomo's new austerity budget. Also tonight, we celebrate Wikipedia's 10th anniversary. How exactly did the free encyclopedia become a vast worldwide resource? But first, Egypt, Tunisia, and beyond. Joining us via Skype from Doha, Qatar, Blake Hounshell, Managing Editor of Foreign Policy, FP.com, on the web. Hello, Blake. Thank you for doing this. Hello from New York.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Let me start in Washington, where President Obama had been criticized for not having a coherent foreign policy toward the region until the last few days. Do you think he has one now?
Well, I think like everyone else, the White House is scrambling to keep up with events. They're watching closely to see what happens each day, and they seem, about 24 hours behind the news. I think that there's going to have to be a huge strategic rethink about the region once the dust settles. But until then, the White House is only going to be in crisis mode. You
wrote an article with the 9 main reasons that Mubarak got himself into this mess. Where would you like to start?
Well, that's a good way to put it. There are many reasons that Mubarak is in the pickle he's in now. But I would say, to make a long story short, he's really failed to develop his country over the last 30 years. He inherited a country that his economy was about the size of China's at the time. And now, Egypt is really in dire straits. People have to really humiliate themselves with corruption and, menial labor in order to just survive each day. About a quarter of the population lives under $2 a day. And he's really just done a horrendous job of developing his country and providing the basic measure of human dignity that we all want. And I think that's really at the core of what is behind these protests. The Egyptians, when they saw the Tunisians rise up against Zine El Abidine Ben Ali, they thought, why can't we? We're a proud nation. We've been around for thousands of years. I think it's time for us to have our say.
We in the media are debating among ourselves how to characterize the thousands who are in the street in support of Mubarak. Is it right to call them pro-Mubarak demonstrators, or as the anti-Mubarak demonstrators would have it, should we be calling them hired Mubarak thugs?
Well, I think that there are certainly some pro-Mubarak, genuine pro-Mubarak supporters out there, but having lived in Egypt and seen the way these protests work, a lot of them are hired thugs. They're the same type of people who go out and intimidate people during election season. A lot of them, according to reports that I've read today, were found with police IDs on them or state security forces IDs on them. Hosni Mubarak's police forces, when you look at the whole gamut of them, probably about 1 million people. So he has a real enormous repressive apparatus to bring to bear. And, I think it just strains credulity to the breaking point to think that the people that were beating up innocent protesters in Tahrir Square tonight were just simply ordinary Egyptians, out to support Hosni Mubarak. This was our Tiananmen Square moment in Egypt.
Is there some kind of demographic in Egypt that Mubarak has the support of?
Well, I think that's what the regime is trying to test right now. They're trying to see what kind of minimal concessions they can get away with and divide and conquer the opposition, peel away the most radical protesters from more moderate elements. And we saw today that Vice President Omar Suleiman was talking about having some dialogue with various political parties. But I don't think that's going to work because the people that are really behind this uprising are ordinary young people. They're not organized, they're not in any political party. In fact, they despise the opposition parties that have been so ineffectual for so many years. So I think it's going to be hard to put this genie back in the bottle.
So what do you see as the possible outcomes if Mubarak is digging in and the protesters are digging in?
Well, the hope is that there's some sort of Pinochet moment where the military comes to Mubarak and says, look, Hosni, you've done a great job, but it's time to gracefully retire. Last night was sort of halfway there, but if there's further instability, the economy continues to be in crisis, then I think the army will act to protect its prestige and its interests and tell Mubarak that he has to step down immediately.
Do you see camps in U.S. foreign policy with respect to what to do now? Is there a Democratic and Republican divide on this, even a Tea Party position?
I think what's actually been remarkable is just how brittle the Mubarak regime's support really was in Washington. There was not any sort of outcry in favor of, letting this guy stick around. There were a few op-eds. Some people poked their heads up on CNN, but generally speaking, I think Americans across the board are fed up with their tax dollars going to support this kind of repression and incompetence. And I think people are genuinely moved by what they see on Al Jazeera. They see these ordinary people just demanding their rights, and it's really an inspiring thing.
I think despite the fear that a lot of people have as to potential ramifications if the wrong kind of government comes to power in Egypt, potential negative ramifications for the U.S., I think nobody on any side at this point sees Mubarak as a viable alternative going forward. You are in Qatar, which is the home of Al Jazeera. Why does the government of an Arab country that might itself have a reform movement to fear fund Al Jazeera, which stokes the fire?
Well, that is a very interesting question. I think Al Jazeera, while it claims to be a lot like the BBC, there are signs that it does, bow to the dictates of Qatari foreign policy from time to time. And what I think the Qataris are trying to do is they're a tiny country. They've got a lot of money. They've got a lot of gas. But they are trying to really multiply their clout and voice on the world stage. And, I think this, Hosni Mubarak actually once visited Qatar, and he went to the studios of Al Jazeera, and he said, all this trouble coming out of this little box. And it's really incredible what they're able to do, both in the Arab world and now with Al Jazeera English globally. They're really shaking up world politics.
Certainly a lot of trouble for Hosni Mubarak coming out of that little box. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
What's been the role of the digital revolution in Tunisia and Egypt and elsewhere? We've heard many off-the-cuff assessments lately. The other day, we put that question to someone who has studied this in detail. Philip N. Howard, author of The Digital Origins of Dictatorship and Democracy, Information Technology and Political Islam.
The book I wrote looks at 75 countries over the last 15 years and comes up with what seems to be a basic recipe for democratization. And the modern recipe for democratization involves having a very active civil society that is digitally sophisticated. So it means having a group of actors, political actors, who aren't part of political parties, who aren't leaders in the state. They do things like run churches, synagogues, and mosques. They run hospitals. They do charity work for the poor. And having a tech-savvy civil society seems to be the thing that pushes towards democratization. Now, Tunisia and Egypt and Iran are probably the countries with both a large civil society and a large number of internet users. Libya, Algeria, Jordan, Yemen, these countries probably don't have a large, well-organized civil society. I think there may be cascading effects. We've seen some protests in other regional cities. I don't know if there's the same opportunity for regime change in those countries as there is in Egypt and Iran.
Philip N. Howard also thinks that smartphones, Twitter, and Facebook are forces against governments cracking down on demonstrators.
So, digital storytelling in times of political crisis usually involves a couple of things. It means keeping your friends and family up to date about the risks where you are in the city, where the police are, where the tear gas is, where the rubber bullets are. But it also means documenting state oppression. And one of the most important ways that digital media has been effective in Cairo and Tunis has been in recording what the police response has been. And regimes, dictators, have a very tough responding with a counterinsurgency campaign when the information being relayed between family and friends are pictures of police brutality. So seeing the police break into an apartment building, seeing the rubber bullets fly or the tear gas canisters explode, that kind of expression of chaos on the streets, in some senses, that's what activates even more rage against the regime.
Author Philip Howard. Does digital technology connect democratic forces in different countries in the Middle East? For example, could Syria be on the list of countries to revolt? Anas Katesh, editor of Global Voices Arabic Lingua, joins us via Skype from Boston. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Do you think Syria, another repressive dictatorship, has the ingredients for a popular revolt?
I have seen some calls, but given the current circumstances, I think it's highly unlikely that a large-scale protest like we've seen in Egypt or Tunisia would happen for different reasons.
What are some of the missing ingredients?
I think basically one of them is there's a lot tighter control on internet communications. Everything is monitored, whether in cafes or for personal use. And I think the regime is playing or betting on one factor that would be in its benefit, that it's the Syrian population, even those who don't like the regime, think that the foreign policy is sound, and thus it's just basically lots of Syrian people would identify with the basics of the Syrian foreign policy, which also would play a mitigating factor in containing popular rage, I would say.
Give us some history about Syria. Something happened in 1982, correct?
Yes, absolutely. One also major factor, which is also important now in Egypt, for any popular revolution to succeed, it needs to be supported by the military. Syrian history in 1982, there was a coup attempt by the Muslim Brotherhood, who were making terrorist acts at the time, but the way they were quashed, an entire city, part of it was shelled to the ground, killing around 10,000 people, many of them civilians, by the army. So people also are afraid of such harsh response of repeating that same scenario that happened in 1982. So we've seen so far in Egypt, the army has been mostly neutral or just watching, even while the protesters were getting attacked. They were getting hit by Molotov cocktails. So once the army decides which way it's going to go, that determines whether a popular revolution will work or not. And I think that's also a factor. People, I think in Syria, many of them are afraid of repeating what happened in 1982.
Do I understand correctly that after the internet kill switch was hit by Mubarak the other day, shutting down the internet in Egypt, that you helped people communicate with each other digitally in some other way?
I didn't do it personally. There were, for a couple of days, there was one ISP that was still running, and then people were given phone numbers that they can use dial-up modems to contact abroad. Foreign ISPs basically wanted to help the Egyptian people. They gave them internet access through landlines. And Google and Twitter launched a project that would allow people to call an international number and record the message, and it would be tweeted on Twitter. So that was also an impressive technology that was developed in a matter of days to respond to the needs of the Egyptian people. This morning, internet access was restored in Egypt, and lots of Egyptians are now back online, tweeting and uploading photos and reporting on the protests.
Why, if the Mubarak government is physically cracking down on the protesters in the streets, would they turn the internet back on today?
I think there are two reasons. One is that cutting down the internet is not really working. Messages are still going out of Egypt, and satellite TV is doing a great job covering what's going on. And the second part, I think, is economical. Once you cut off the internet from the entire country, you're going to hit the economy hard. So, I mean, Mubarak currently apparently has a death wish. He's clinging to power at any price, but I think it's not effective cutting down the internet. Information was still going out, so it also would make a good source of gathering intelligence on what the protesters are doing or planning to do.
So is part of the lesson that people need to build decentralized digital grids so that they could communicate around the central government with each other? That is, even if the central government tried to turn off something, that they couldn't turn off everything because they're not in control of it all?
Absolutely. There are currently two methods. A is having a satellite internet link that can't be cut off centrally by the government. And the second, it's a technology still in development, I believe. It's called mesh networking, and it would work on cell phones. Basically, in cities, if you have high densities of people, cell phones can communicate with one another without relying on infrastructure or sending back the data to a centralized location that would then relay it back to other cell phones. So cell phones basically would be network independent and would work that way. So it's definitely possible.
We're seeing the digital revolution continue in the midst of the political revolution. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Coming up, Bronx Borough President Ruben Diaz Jr. and the New York State austerity budget.
Did you know CUNY leads the way for students with disabilities?
CUNY leads to my career as a healthcare professional.
CUNY leads to my career as an accountant.
CUNY leads to my career as a music teacher.
CUNY leads means linking employment, academics, and disability services. If you're a CUNY student with a visible or invisible disability, the City University of New York offers eligible students free career development and placement services.
Gain access to exciting employment opportunities through the power of a CUNY education.
As an employer, CUNY Leads provides me with a more qualified, diverse workforce.
Each campus has its own Leads counselor, a go-to person who knows you
and helps you enjoy every aspect of college life.
For more information and to find out if you qualify, visit cuny.edu/CUNYLeads. CUNY Leads, to the career I always wanted.
To be a great dad is the most important job in a man's life, but it doesn't have to be hard. All it takes is a few minutes of your time, because the smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today.
The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today.
Railing against built-in spending increases and calling the state functionally bankrupt, Governor Andrew Cuomo yesterday proposed a budget that would do something that's not happened in more than a decade. It would actually reduce state spending from one year to the next. Education would take a big hit, about $1.5 billion, so would Medicaid, nearly $1 billion. And state agencies would cut more than $500 million from their budgets. Governor Cuomo seemed to be enjoying himself, lambasting his audience of Albany lawmakers and officials.
We're at a crossroads and there are two roads. I believe if we continue doing what we're doing, the state goes down the road to ruin. I think we also have an opportunity to take the road of recovery. It is a time when we're sending out an SOS to save our state. And it is up to you. And let me say this in closing. I know this is going to be hard. First of all, change is hard. I love the concept of change. Everybody's in favor of change. You ask people, do we need change? Yes, we need change. Ask people in a relationship, ask people, husband and wife, do we need change? Oh, yes. We need a lot of change. That's right, everybody agrees. We need a lot of change. What they really mean is you need to change. They're doing pretty well where they are. You are the problem, and you really need to change, and you need to understand that. They like control, and they want to stay just the way they are. But everybody thinks they like change. When change actually comes to them, it's shocking, and it's frightening, and it's anxiety-producing. And that's where we are today.
In the budget message, Governor Cuomo promised to protect the state's most vulnerable citizens. Ruben Diaz Jr. speaks for many of them. He is the borough president of the Bronx, which has the highest unemployment and poverty rates in the state. The Bronx has wonderful things, too. We will address it all. Mr. Diaz is here tonight as part of our series on the state of the boroughs. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's good to be here, Brian.
Your reactions to the governor's austerity budget address?
Well, look, he has a mandate as the governor to come here and try to do more with less. The people of the state of New York spoke when they voted for Governor Cuomo, and folks wanted him to go up there and chip away at the deficit. And so we all know that there's a hard times and there are tough decisions that need to be made. But as you said earlier, and I know a little bit about the process in Albany since I was up there for 12.5 years, there are some things that we have to continue to analyze and examine and work with the governor, work with the legislature, because they will create an adverse effect if they get hit too hard, at least for Bronxites. What do I mean by that? When I was in Albany, I fought tremendously for CUNY. Brian, you know I'm a CUNY twofer. I graduated from LaGuardia Community College, and I graduated from Lehman College in the Bronx. And it was there sitting next to many Bronxites and New Yorkers that I understood the importance of CUNY. And so in this budget here, we have to make sure that the cuts that are going to happen and go down with higher education, that we still afford New Yorkers the ability to educate themselves. We have to look at our educational system to make sure that whatever cuts need to come down to the city of New York, that it does not hit the classrooms, it does not adversely affect students in the classroom, that maybe there are other ways to cut administratively, but not by doing away with teachers or equipment. And then lastly, let me just say this lastly, as the borough president in the borough, I have to make sure that we continue to have jobs in the healthcare industry, since it's the #1 employer in our 1 out of every 4 adults in the Bronx are employed by the healthcare industry. So I'm with a watchful eye, and I want to work with the governor.
Let me play you a healthcare example from the governor's speech, where he goes exactly where I think you were trying to go with the education example, so that whatever cuts are made don't actually adversely impact the education of the kids, or in this case, the governor talks about the cuts hopefully not adversely impacting patients who get home health care. Watch this.
It highlights, let's talk about Medicaid first. In terms of redesign, As you know, we spoke about it in the State of the State. We have a Medicaid redesign task force which is working extraordinarily well. Their purpose is to redesign the programs. How do you take these programs, produce better services for the people, and reduce the cost to the taxpayer? The redesign task force will assume the governor's budget goal that is in this presentation. They've already had over 1,000 ideas collected as they've been going through the state. So, for example, what are they going to do? The home health care program, which is a program I know very well. I investigated it as Attorney General. It's also one of the fastest growing Medicaid programs in the law. From 2003 to 2009, almost a 90% increase in the benefits that go to a recipient. 90%. $1 of Medicaid money first goes to what's called a Certified Home Health Agency, a CHA, they call it. The CHA then takes 26 cents for administrative overhead and contracts with a licensed home care service agency called Alexa, which takes 26 cents of overhead, and then contracts with the actual caregiver, who is the person who's going to go into the home to provide the care, who gets 48 cents. When you redesign the programs, find ways to reduce cost and find ways to take the fat out of the system. The Medicaid system was not supposed to be spending more than 50 cents on the dollar for overhead. Medicaid is not about supporting the home health care industry. It really isn't. It was about getting care to a person. 48 cents goes to the caregiver, to the person. Redesign it, find out how to do away with the 52, save money for the taxpayer, and actually get better services for the person. This is a snapshot, but you can do this over and over and over and over again all throughout the Medicaid program.
That was quite a striking example, Borough President. If true, do you look at the home health care program the same way? I'm sure many people in the Bronx take advantage of it if they're in that situation, and many people in the Bronx probably work in it.
Well, you got to understand that when you speak of Medicaid in the state of New York, out of the 130 some odd, in this case $132.9 billion that he's proposing in the budget, over $50 billion goes into Medicaid. That's the largest of any state in the union. And I think he makes a lot of sense. And what he's saying, Brian, is that, you know, the way that the funding is allocated, you know, there's sick, forgive the pun, but there's a sick way of doing the budget. And so I think it's smart that he has this task force of all interested parties to come in there, and instead of just coming in with a chainsaw, that they're going to go with precision with a scalpel and look at the administrative costs and how is it that you can diminish that so it doesn't affect the type of care. And when we speak of the care to the patient, we're also speaking of the person who's actually in the homes, which are the employees that come from the borough of the Bronx. The same goes with education. You know, we sent up in Albany, it was frustrating to me to vote on education increases every year. That money comes into different localities, in this case being New York City. And how much of that money was going to Tweed? Today, we see hundreds and hundreds new contracts that are being paid for to the tunes of millions of dollars. And if we're going to cut education, if that has to be the case, and no one wants to do that, but we're in a difficult time, then we should look at Tweed, we should look at those contracts.
And Tweed is the central education department.
The Department of Education. So we should look at eliminating course there as opposed to how it affects our children in the classroom. If you can do that correctly, if you stipulate it in language in the budget bill, I think then there we can reduce the deficit and do so in a way where you're not really hurting the people that need the services the most.
Let me ask you another education question. This week, the Mayor's Council on Education Priorities voted to shut down 10 underperforming high schools, including, I believe, 4 in the Bronx. Highly controversial. Where are you on this? Is this the best way to restart education in a better way for high school students?
It's never a good thing to shut down a school for our students. And my appointment to the panel on education policy, we voted no on a number of the schools, but we also voted yes, Brian, on, I think it was John F. Kennedy High School. And the reason being is that there were just a situation there where you just can't salvage. And no one wants to continue to send our students into a school building where they're not getting a quality education. We're looking at other middle schools. We've been working with the Department of Education. We've been speaking to parents, to the CEC members in the Bronx, and we are going case by case scenario as to how is it that we save schools, perhaps change the administration, give schools the resources, but when a school is just not performing and hasn't done so in some years, then something has to change.
So what do you do after that? John F. Kennedy, it's thousands of students, right?
Right.
Do you use the same facility but chop it up into new, smaller schools and it's not called the same thing and you bring in new principals, or what do you do?
Well, what the DOE wants to do is, and what they have a history of doing is exactly that. Is a phase out. So people think that they're just going to padlock the building. That's not the case. They wind up allowing for the existing school to sort of phase out. In other words, if you have a 9 through 12, then next year you won't have a 9th grade. The 9th graders become 10th graders, and so on and so forth until that school phases out. And at the same time, then you start.
Where do they go? I live near that school.
Right.
Where do my neighbors go when they hit 9th grade?
They go to the 10th grade in John F. Kennedy, and then the 11th grade in John F. Kennedy, and then they graduate. But they don't. John F. Kennedy doesn't continue with a 9th grade class.
Right. But
what they do is they start a new.
Coming in.
They start a new school at the 9th grade
in the
building under a different name. And what happens here, and what's frustrating to many parents, and rightfully so, is that some of the schools that are on the chopping block now were quote unquote new schools that the DOE started 4 and 5 years ago, and all of a sudden now they are being closed as well.
So is there a better way?
There has to be a better way. There has to be a way where the new chancellor, and I spoke to her 2 weeks ago, where we give parents more input, where we give the schools, and you can't do this in a cookie cutter way. We have to give the schools that that you want to open up, or the schools that don't need necessarily to be closed down, the resources, whether it's after school program, whether it's counseling, whether it's all types of incentives or programs to enhance the teacher's performance. We have to make sure that these schools are not just put out there again, so that 4, 5, 6 years from now, we're going to have them close it once again.
We have a few minutes. Let me touch a number of other issues.
Sure.
Quick questions, quick answers. You have praised the mayor's proposal to create a new category of livery cabs that can be hailed. Good for the Bronx?
I think so. The reality is that yellow cabs do not come north of 96th Street. They don't go to the other boroughs. And what you wind up getting is livery cab drivers who, when they pick somebody up off the streets, you cannot do that. So you decriminalizing, you allowing for men and women who want to do nothing else but to provide food on the table and pay the rent for their families to be able to go out there and pick up hails without being stopped, without being fined, without eventually losing their license. So I think it's a good idea.
You're a critic of the MTA, but the Bronx is also the home of the first rapid transit bus line experiment, the BX12, which goes across Fordham Road and Pelham Parkway. How's that working out, and is it a template for the rest of the city?
It is, and I've supported it when I was in the assembly. As the borough president, I continue to speak with Commissioner Khan and especially the business community on Fordham Road. And it seems to me that what you're getting is a clear and more rapid passage with the BRTs. At the same time, I've been critical of the MTA because they've done everything from showing us 2 books to somebody's bright idea to take away students' Metro cards. Time and time again, they've proven to be insensitive. They continue to close down some of our bus lines that senior citizens need to get to and from doctor's appointments. These bus lines are essential for our most vulnerable, which are our seniors. And we're going to continue to make sure that in the Bronx, we get the same services that you get in other places.
The Hunts Point market, one of the economic engines of the Bronx, a lot of jobs, and yet you've criticized the mayor for not doing enough to keep it there. Might that market move to somewhere else?
We hope not, Brian. And we just found out that, believe it or not, the Lieutenant Governor of New Jersey just visited the produce market and the members there and made a pitch to try to get them to New Jersey. And in fact, I put in a call today to the Lieutenant Governor Duffy here in the state of New York, and we have to do something collectively. We want the New York City Department of Economic Development Corporation to come to the table. We want all parties to come to the table to see how is it that we finance a new facility there where it's efficient, where business can be done, and at the same time address the BIC, which is the Business Integrity Commission that was designed by former Mayor Rudolph Giuliani to root out crime, organized crime. We need to make sure that when they go in there that they're really going after the bad guy and not harassing the everyday merchant. This is a produce market that's the largest in the world now. It employs thousands of Bronxites and New Yorkers, and it provides food for 60% of the tri-state area. We cannot lose them to New Jersey.
Last thing, the image of the Bronx in the media. It got dissed on American Idol with Bronx contestants. Glenn Beck called Co-op City a failed socialist state, or compared it to a failed socialist state. How about the bad raps that the Bronx gets?
Well, let me start with Glenn Beck. He's failed. His program has failed. That's why his viewership continues to diminish. He's been wrong on so many different issues, from immigration to equality for all. He's been wrong on issues on education. And in this case, with Co-op City, how dare he come and try to put a negative light on one of our great developments where people have been living there for many years, where he tried to call this a socialist state where many folks are out there not only making a good buck, but providing for their families. In terms of American Idol, what bothered me the most is that in a minute and a half, they tried to erase 2.5 decades of good work. If you look at the Bronx, the infrastructure is great. We have great cultural institutions. We have great parks and beach and golf courses, restaurants. That's what we need to highlight there in the Bronx. They decided to sensationalize using a young man who had his own issues with his family, and rightfully so. We have a lot of work to do. His father was sick. He lost his job. But please don't try to paint the entire Bronx as if we are back in the 70s and the 80s. If I had my chance, I would have used that minute and a half to show 26 million Americans how wonderful the Bronx has become over 2.5 decades.
And the biggest surprise for people visiting the Bronx for the first time, how green the borough is. Bronx Borough President Ruben Diaz Jr., thank you very much.
Thank you.
Here are this week's online video picks. Number 1, the Marines are getting ready to implement the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And this video message to the troops is part of how.
The Marine Corps exists to defend our nation. We are a nation of laws. We are committed through our oath and core values to abide by these laws. Our success as Marines has always been grounded in the quality of our leadership, from general officers to small unit leaders.
Throughout the history of our Corps, Marines have always been professional, carrying on our warrior ethos and maintaining our core values. The Marine Corps is a diverse force, and all have earned the privilege to wear the Eagle globe and anchor. As Marines, we are confident you will continue to treat each other with dignity and respect. The Commandant and I have trust in the great leadership of our Corps, from junior Marines to the most senior. As always, engaged leadership will be the key to implementation.
I want to be clear to all Marines. We will step out smartly to faithfully implement this new law. It's important that we value the diversity of background, culture, and skills that all Marines bring to the service of our nation. As we implement repeal, I want leaders at all levels to reemphasize the importance of maintaining dignity and respect for one another throughout our force. We are Marines. We care for one another and respect the rights of all who wear this uniform. We will continue to demonstrate to the American people that discipline and fidelity, which have been the hallmarks of the United States Marine Corps for more than 235 years, will continue well into the future.
Tolerance, sir. Yes, sir. Let's hope that works. Video pick number 2. Hold on to your ethanol containers, politics junkies. The Iowa caucuses are 1 year from next week. And if you don't think the presidential campaign is already underway, check out this video from former Minnesota Governor Tim Pawlenty. It accompanies the release of his new book, The Courage to Stand.
The United States of America is the most successful nation the world has ever known. And I think that's largely because we're the freest nation. Humans cannot reach their potential, cannot realize their dreams unless they're free.
If prosperity were easy, everybody around the world would be prosperous. If freedom were easy, everybody around the world would be free. If security were easy, everybody around the world would be secure. They are not. None of this is going to be easy. But this is the United States of America. It takes an extraordinary effort. It takes extraordinary commitment. It takes extraordinary strength. The Valley Forge wasn't easy. Going to the moon wasn't easy. Settling the West wasn't easy. We are the American people. We have seen difficulties before, and we always overcome them. This is about rolling up our sleeves. We may have some differences, but as Americans, putting our head down and getting it done.
Well, that's how you soft launch a campaign. Later, they get into the hardcore attack ads. Like this one. Imagine that winter was running for office against the other seasons.
Winter. It claims to be the season of enchantment, that snow is pretty, and that it's Christmassy. But did you know that Christmas is a mere 3 days into winter? And where does winter leave you after that? Out in the cold. Winter claims it only lasts 3 months, just like every other season. But doesn't it feel longer? That's because it is. On April 3rd, 1986, a full 2 weeks after winter was supposed to be over, a blizzard blanketed the East Coast. Snow in April? Really? Sure, winter claims to be on the level, saying, but what winter isn't telling you is that it's in bed with chicken soup lobbyists. The lies just keep snowballing. Summer stands for barbecues, the smell of suntan lotion, and not being depressed. And unlike winter, it's almost never cold. So this year, vote summer.
That from AOL Originals, and bashing back on this winter had to feel good, didn't it? Or you could just bundle up and hop on your bike this time of year. Street Films shows us how.
There's a few steps in getting ready for cycling through the winter, and I kind of like to think of it as starting from the inside out, and really the very first place is to start with up here mentally. Know that it's not going to be as bad as you might think. The rest of it is really more about not really trying to stay warm, but actually just regulating the heat. One of your biggest enemies when you're riding in the winter is actually overheating. Picking the right clothes is important there. Probably the first thing that I think is important is a good set of long underwear. You know, this isn't your granddad's waffle weave, cotton, Sears and Roebuck long underwear. This is synthetic, and it's designed to pull moisture off your body and help it evaporate. A second layer of just a wool sweater is always a great mid-layer. And then on the bottoms, I'm a big fan of jeans, and then an outer layer. And I think it's more important for your outer layer to be windproof than it is for it to be waterproof. What I love about mittens is they keep you warmer because your whole hand is sharing all the heat. For feet, definitely want to give yourself some nice sets of thick wool socks, and then just some good winter boots. And the important thing to know about shoes is you want to have a lot of room in there. Once we step outside, we'll talk about a couple of more things just in terms of safety and riding, but that's a good start for keeping yourself warm. We're outside now. We're going to get rolling. There's a couple more items that I just want to talk about clothing-wise. Headgear. I'm a really big fan of a thin insulating skull cap, and then the infamous balaclava, not to be confused with baklava, which is the Mediterranean dessert. A lot of people ask if you need a special bike to ride in the winter. I think for 99% of the winter, that's not necessary. You can use the same bike all year round. One thing that is really nice to have on your bike, though, is a good set of full fenders. All right, ready to go?
All right, you ready? Now keep in mind that delivery people must bike despite the ice and snow or lose their paycheck. So if you can afford a Peking duck to be brought to your door, be really generous with the tip, eh? And video pick number 5, it's the 10th anniversary of Wikipedia, the free encyclopedia that anyone can edit. Its growth has been extraordinary. Here is part of their birthday video, narrated by the founder, Jimmy Wales.
Over time, as many as 1.2 million people have contributed to Wikipedia.
As of 2010, there are more than 11 million monthly edits to all Wikipedias in all languages. According to one survey, we have about twice the proportion of PhDs compared to the general public. On the English Wikipedia, almost 50% have no religion, and 14.6% of French editors claim to believe in Pastafarianism. It would be fair to say that most Wikipedians are not average. One reason, maybe, is that editing a single page is easy, but getting heavily involved is harder. The community is defined by more than 200 combined policies, guidelines, and essays, to say nothing of the discussions and reviews, committees and notice boards, wiki projects, and more. All the site content is decided by Wikipedia's volunteer contributors. The Wikimedia Foundation has no editorial role whatsoever. The Foundation's job is to keep the servers running and the lights on, but there's more to it than that. The Foundation is also growing Wikipedia's presence worldwide. More data centers to speed up Wikipedia worldwide, and even bringing its first office outside of the United States to India. Wikipedia is already very popular in the West and in the North. A new challenge is going to be making Wikipedia available to the developing world as well. The Foundation is a charity and runs entirely on donations, some from corporations and institutions, but the vast majority from its millions of editors and readers. It's incredible what has been accomplished already, but Wikipedia is far from done. As any reader knows, some articles are very good, but some are not. Wikipedia still needs a lot of work. Yet, this is a new challenge, not just building an encyclopedia from scratch, but making it better, more accurate, more citations. Not just broad, but deep. There's never been anything like Wikipedia before, and its future horizon is very, very long. As Wikipedia enters its second decade, it's up to all of us to make sure it gets even better.
And those are this week's online video picks. Now, let's dig a little deeper. In honor of Wikipedia's 10th birthday, we take a deeper look at that astonishing collaborative enterprise. It's really unique in human history. Joseph Reagle is a fellow at the Harvard Law School's Berkman Center for Internet and Society and author of Good Faith Collaboration, The Culture of Wikipedia. He joins us now via Skype from Cambridge, Mass. Hello from New York.
Hello, Brian.
Your book title says The Culture of Wikipedia. What is the culture of Wikipedia?
The culture of Wikipedia, I describe it as being a good faith collaborative culture, and that is both cognizant of the challenges online collaborators have and includes a number of norms like don't bite the newcomers, be nice, neutral point of view.
How does collaboration work on Wikipedia? Give us an example, especially for people who haven't used it or haven't ever contributed to it, how that sausage is made.
Well, just in this past week, I noted a article for the book itself was created on Wikipedia, so I could take you through a couple of the steps that have happened so far.
Sure.
So someone created an article. It was just a stub, not more than 2 sentences, saying that I worked on this book when I was at MIT. But in fact, that was not the case. It was published by MIT Press, and I had some history with MIT Press. So cognizant of the conflict of interest policy, which tells people they shouldn't edit on things that are relevant to them, I said, actually, I did this when I was at NYU. I left a comment on the discussion page saying, I don't intend to edit this page much, but at least I fixed that bald error. Here's some information with more details. No one objected to that. A couple of people added a few more tiny edits. Someone noticed that there was no category on the page and labeled it as uncategorized. Some people provided some links to related materials. And then just today, someone nominated it for deletion for not being sufficiently notable.
So that's an interesting example. You write about 3 core principles that guide the Wikipedia community, and you were getting at these before: neutral point of view, no original research, and verifiability. Why no original research?
I call that the anti-kook law. And on the internet, particularly with respect to the Usenet, an old discussion forum that people used to use before the web, people would frequently talk about kooks. These are enthusiastic, usually harmless people who believe that they've come up with some great new theory of relativity, or they've proven Einstein wrong, something along those lines. And Wikipedia, given it is a compendium of knowledge, needs a way to say, please, we don't have the facilities nor the experts to review original contributions to knowledge. So get your research published in a peer-reviewed article, and then we can reference it. And like I said, this allows Wikipedia to avoid a lot of potentially biased or crazy or self-interested claims that people would like to make.
So if not the self-interested, who are the people who contribute to Wikipedia, and why are less than 15% of them women?
There are about 80,000 Wikipedians across all of the projects. At the English Wikipedia, which is the focus of my study, there's about 35,000 active Wikipedians. It's hard to get a sense of what Wikipedians are, given that there's thousands of them, and they're spread all over the world. But in the past year, a survey, a significantly sized survey, with some findings was released, and it noted that, not surprisingly, most Wikipedians on average are relatively young males in their early 20s. 25% have a college education, though given their youth, some of those might get further education. And as you said, supposedly less than 15% of Wikipedians are female. Now it's the questions of why. It's something I'm actively working on right now. And one of my theories is that it's a convergence of the ideology and rhetoric of freedom and openness, which are otherwise very good things in these communities. I'm quite fond of them. But because, for example, a community is open, it means it's also open to difficult people, including sincere misogynists or insincere people that are trolling just to try to get a rise out of people. And the community then has these huge discussions and potentially flame wars about what to do in these instances, and can you ban these people? Well, this is an open community. Well, can we ask them to be nicer? Well, that's censorship. And the very openness of these communities make them susceptible to those sort of non-useful interventions from other people.
Is it possible to measure the impact of Wikipedia on how informed the world is? Are there particular topic areas where you think the information on Wikipedia has actually had an impact?
Well, funnily enough, there are some Wikipedia pages where they document Wikipedia appearing in books, appearing in court cases and decisions, occurring in the media, occurring in news stories. And in that context, Wikipedia itself, though some people say a lot of its content is generated through plagiarism, Wikipedia itself is plagiarized. So just in terms of Wikipedia being around, being heavily used, and making appearances in all manner of media, I think it is safe to conclude that Wikipedia has made an impact on the world.
We just have about a minute left. Wikipedia, remarkably, for as voluminous as it is a not-for-profit organization. It's like the third most viewed site on the internet. Could it, should it, in your opinion, start taking ads and go commercial to be a better service?
I think it would not be easy for the community to accept that. In fact, I think it would be impossible. It was discussed early in Wikipedia's history, and it caused a significant break within the community, including the Spanish Wikipedia forking, which is what people call when you take a free content project, you take all the content somewhere else and decide to work elsewhere with a different community. So the community has already been traumatized, in a sense, through that experience, and the foundation, and I think almost all community members, are pretty committed to making sure that there isn't advertising.
Thank you very much for joining us. Happy birthday, Wikipedia.
Thank you.
10 years and counting. Finally tonight, from the Kent Animal Park in southwest England, one of the hottest videos online so far this year, they have a gorilla named Ambam who quite simply walks like a person. So where's his briefcase? And that's it for this week. See us anytime at brianlehrer.tv. Next week, Branding Anonymous. And tune into my daily radio show, 10 a.m. on WNYC Radio. Tomorrow morning is the Arab Democracy Movement Strengthening or Weakening Al-Qaeda. That's 10 a.m. on WNYC 93.9 FM and AM 820. Talk to you then.